Alright, so this is going to be a walkthrough of how we can create a basic setup for the Battleship game in JavaFX. So let's start by creating two new classes. So I have a new project here. I'm going to have a app class, and this could essentially be your Battleship class if you wanted it to be. So we're going to have a very slim class here, but you could also kind of attach it to your Battleship class and go from there. Now again, the main thing here, we say extends application, and when we do that, we import from JavaFX, and then we add the unimplemented method, and we get our basics here. Okay, now here we just say launch args, and that's it for the main class. And then this is where we are putting everything. I'm going to change my stage name to primary stage. Okay, I'm going to pause the video here as I put some code in, and then I'll explain it to you. Okay, so I put some basic code in here. We've set our stage to be our primary stage here, and so what we're going to do is we're just going to give it a name, so our window has a name. We're going to create this pane organizer, and right now we don't have that class yet, and that's really where we're going to put all of our different panes that we're going to use. We have a scene. We basically add the scene to the stage and insert the stage, and that's all for this class, and that's all we need here. Now we're going to create this pane organizer class right here in the Battleship. Okay, and then this is where we're going to put all of our details. Okay, so let's start at the top, and we'll kind of work our way through some of the basics here. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to use a border pane for our main pane. And I like the border pane because it has several different pieces. So if we create the Battleship in the main part, if you want to put something on the right, you can, and we can kind of go from there. But for right now, we're just going to look at putting something right in the main section there. So our constructor is going to be just our pane organizer. And we're not going to take any inputs. And what we're going to do is create our main pane, new border pane. Okay, we're going to give it a basic background color using our set style, and this is going to be fx.background color. I'll just call it gray for right now. Okay, and we're going to say set preferred height to be 500. We're going to make a grid of 50 by 50, and it's a 10 by 10 grid, so we'll get our 500. So set preferred width to 500, and then we're going to call our create grid method, okay, which we don't have yet, and we're going to create that. Okay, and now the other thing that we have, if you go back to our app class, we use this getRoot command, so we need to create that method, and that'll add it here. In our root, we're just going to return a pane, and it is going to just say return main, and that's all we have for that. And then okay, we need to import from JavaFX. Now our create grid is where we're going to do all of our work today, and we'll get through the basics of this. We can essentially create a grid 50 by 50. It's going to use this grid pane. Let's call it our player grid. Right now we're going to kind of take up the whole scene with this grid. You may use something like a HBox or a VBox to create two grids when you do this, but for right now we're just going to look at one. So we need to import from JavaFX. Okay, now we essentially need to create all of our rows and columns, and we're going to do this by using a simple command that says, add a new column. So we have to do that 10 times. So I'm just going to do a quick loop for 10 times. In that loop, I am going to add a column constraint, add a new column constraint. Oops. Okay, and I'm going to put it at 50. And likewise, I'm going to do the same thing for my rows. Oops. Okay, and now that we've created it, we can essentially loop through all of our rows and columns and put our buttons in. And I'm going to pause this here while I add that code in. Alright, so I added a basic loop here for my code to add my button. So I added basically in my loop, looping through my rows and columns, I add a button. I'm setting the button to be a 50 by 50. I am then saying you set the constraints, and I put button, and I put the column in the row. And it's a little bit odd because it does column first, then row. But again, using this grid pane, and notice that it is calling the object method, not the actual player grid button there. And once I do that, it does that. Now, once I've created the button, I need to add it to my grid. And so I say player grid.add. So essentially I'm creating a button, I'm telling it what location it's going to go into, and then I add it in. Then once I'm done with all of these, I will add my grid pane in. So I'm going to say main.getChildren dot add and my player grid. Okay. Now if I run this now, I should see my grid, and I should see a whole bunch of buttons coming up. Okay, and the buttons don't do anything right now, and that's okay. We haven't set up our buttons. But let's take a look at how we could set up something with our buttons. Okay, so we're going to add a button handler here, and I'm just going to put it down in here. Okay, so I basically have set my on action for my particular button within my loop here, since I want to make sure I'm doing this for each button. Now notice that here I'm setting the on action, I'm creating an event handler. Right now my event handler is just printing out the row and the column to the sysout, but I could actually call another method here, or I could essentially take action once I've had the user input a row and grid. Just like you have the user inputting a row and grid now, you could call that same method using this. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just basically turning the button black. Again, just adding that in. Now when I run this, you should see how when I click a button, that particular square turns black. And that's just really my check to make sure that my event handler is actually working, because I have that style in here. And like I said, using this grid pane, again calling the object method, I can get the row index, get the column index of the button that was clicked, and then I could pass that to another method if I wanted to. Okay, so hopefully this gets you started. It gives you some ideas on how you could kind of set this up in a Battleship game. You're going to want to think about how you put ships on there and put them to display, but you can kind of keep that pretty basic with some colors or something like that. Let me know if you have questions as you get started. Thanks.